Welcome back to the weekly podcast. I'm your host, Brand Strong, and I'm reporting to you from Michigan, where we have a unfolding medical marijuana takeover in progress going on, as written by the legislator and passed by the governor. And we also have a ballot initiative floating around out there for legalizing recreational marijuana and hemp. I'll be reporting on that as time progresses, and I'll be reporting on the progress of the Michigan's new medical marijuana industry, as they call it, as it develops. Here we have Canada. We're going to start out with some national and international news, like always. But I'm just going to say that today, it seems like we have a lot of stories concerning medical marijuana, because that's kind of a big deal. And unfortunately, if you live in Texas, you might not be able to get your medical marijuana. That's not very compassionate, because we have proof right now, anecdotal, and now we have studies that prove that not only does cannabis make seizures stop instantly, but the people that use cannabis to stop seizures, namely children that have been studied, subsequently have less seizures overall. Sometimes their seizure number goes down as much as 60%, sometimes 100%. That's pretty promising, really. If nothing else, it's more hopeful than any pharmaceutical drug ever made. There's no pharmaceutical drug out there that has the potential to not only instantly cure a seizure in progress, but also overall stop the number of seizures from happening in the first place. We don't have medicine like that. The only medicine like that puts you practically in a coma. So, we'll get into all these stories, but we're going to start with Canada here, because Canada, and there's also another story out of South America. It's Chile, so I guess I'll start there. I don't have an article pulled up at the moment, but I will do another story about this soon. But basically, you can go to the pharmacies in Chile and purchase marijuana. Now, I remember it was one of the Uruguays, I think it was Uruguay a couple weeks back, maybe a month ago, legalized marijuana. You can go buy it at the pharmacy, and the only thing is you had to register in a database system, and it limited you to like 10 grams a week of this government weed that you were allowed to purchase. Now, I did hear something about the new one in Chile is like, well, if you get caught with hash, though, you can still get life in prison. So we need to work on this whole thing. Like, there isn't any reason to give any criminal penalties for any amount of any concentration of THC, no matter how pure it is. Because it's not toxic, it's not deadly, it's not even dangerous. Absorption rate on the skin is kind of weird. It takes a little while for it to kick in, and it doesn't knock you out. Now, just recently, a police officer was at a car accident scene, a single car accident, and even though the driver was already in custody, they were searching through the vehicle to see if they can find evidence or whatever, and a bunch of white powdery stuff fell on the officer. He overdosed soon after. It was some kind of opiate, super pure. So cannabis doesn't have the potential to do that. But it's a Schedule 1. You can't even get it prescribed. It ain't even considered medicine. But somehow, we have medicine out there that is considered medicine that is so highly concentrated that the powder of it can kill you just by coming into contact with your skin or breathing it in. I think that's what happened when the powdery stuff fell out of wherever it fell from. It created a cloud, and he breathed a bunch of it in. Not very safe. Okay, so the mayors in Canada's biggest cities say they need a slice of the tax windfall from the legal marijuana to cover what they describe as significant costs associated with enforcing a signature initiative from the federal Liberals. Now, this is a clear-cut case of bullshit. First of all, you have Trudeau, who back in April said, hey, here's your marijuana legalization platform. Hammer this shit out and get it ready so we can sign this shit and get it going. And I think he wanted to get things started by July 1st. Maybe it's July 1st of next year, because I think I seen something in the comments section. That's where you go to get real information these days. But anyway, in the comments section, somebody was talking about, well, this is going to take a year before it kicks in anyway, so we got plenty of time to get it right. No hurry. That might be true, but in America, we have this thing called sessions. And when the session's over, you don't get to do anything more if you're in the government until next year. Well, the sessions are almost all over in America. We'll get into that one when we talk about Vermont today, too. So here we have the typical reefer madness style. Whoa, we got to roll this out slow and we got to pay the cops. We got to give them the law enforcement money. They never have a good excuse as to why you need to give law enforcement money. I can tell you why. Because you guys don't need to, you don't have anything to do anymore. I mean, a great majority of you. Let's face it, this giant police apparatus that's been set up in all over the world, really, is because of marijuana. It is, man. It's a simple fact that marijuana enforcement has created militarized police. It's created crazy policies like stop and frisk. It's created a prison industrial complex that feeds prisoners to this prison system because, it's a private industry now. And they need marijuana because that's cranking out the numbers. And marijuana prisoners, I'm guessing, are probably not violent. They're probably the ideal inmate that a prison would want to have. Not me, though. So no matter what you say, it's basically like, legalizing marijuana would probably take care of a lot of these costs. You would have a lot of freed up time by police officers because they're not too busy writing marijuana police reports, taking that extra time to search things because of marijuana. Then you got to go take stuff to the lab and pay for it to get tested. You got this court case coming up that you got to be there for. You might even have to do a couple of trial runs on your testimony. It's time consuming. Each marijuana case requires all that shit and more. Sometimes people get a jury trial. These trials take a long time and cost a lot of money. So you don't need more money when you legalize marijuana, dipshit. You need less money. You need less police. You need less court. Well, let's see how they justify it. They raised their concerns with cabinet ministries this week, pressing the case that some tax revenues from sale of the drug filter down to cover costs associated with land use issues, business license applications, and enforcement once purchase, sale, and recreational use of the drug is no longer illegal. Okay, enforcement of what? It ain't illegal anymore. What the fuck are you enforcing? Oh, there's age limits and shit. Like, you know what? You don't have to. It's not going to cost you any extra to do that because all the adults are already legal, so don't worry about it. And let's rewind it back a little bit farther. Land use issues. What do you mean land use issues? Canada's got to be the biggest waste of land there ever was. And I don't think anybody's talking about outdoor grow operations anyway. And then you have business licensing applications. How's that going to cost money? Usually a business license application has this thing called a business license application fee. It's usually a pretty nominal little $10, $15 fee because that's the way it is. That all your administrative costs and stuff of doing these licenses is already covered. I'm sure that when you set license fees for the actual license, we're going to be talking about some exorbitant shit. So you're going to have all the money that you need for all your other bullshit, which you don't really need. And furthermore, enforcement is not a thing. You're not enforcing something if it's legal. That doesn't make any sense. If anything, we have penalties and business license threats against stuff like that if you do things outside of the border of these limits that are set. And my argument is if you're legalizing marijuana and someone that was allowed to grow marijuana had like 2 or 3 extra plants or some shit, they don't get prison terms. All right, it isn't a felony, so we need to take all these criminal penalties out of marijuana. Marijuana is not dangerous. It's not a fucking thing that you need criminal penalties for, and all that ends up doing is push it into the black market. As soon as things get too expensive because there's criminal penalties and there's license fees for this and there's application fees for that, and next thing you know, it's just not even worth it to do it on paper. So you got to draw the balance. That's your job, not just to overall say, oh, we need more money. We're not in a position to collect any taxes. Edmonton Mayor Don Iveson, chairman of the Mayor's Group, said in an interview this week. That's some bullshit. Anybody that does business in your municipality is up for grabs on taxes, idiot. So don't even... What are you trying to say, that there's some kind of a clause in the marijuana law where it makes them tax exempt? Man, there isn't nothing like that. One conversation that we think is important to have is support for local governments dealing with the cost of enforcement. You haven't said what you're enforcing, dumbass. It's not illegal. What are you enforcing? It would be up to local police to enforce impaired driving laws. They already do. Provisions about sales to minors and any necessary bylaws for dispensaries that open in communities. All right, the second point he made about the sales to minors. It's illegal to sell to minors. So the people that are regulated to sell the marijuana aren't going to be selling it to minors. And it'll be just like alcohol. If you get caught selling to the people that are not in the regulation limits, then you get penalized. In America, I think it's like the contributing to the delinquency of a minor. It's like $1,000 fine or some shit. And if you get caught doing it, you're up for losing your license if you have a license to sell beer or liquor. So don't be facetious with your demands when you're just asking for more money to do the same shit you're already doing. Now, what's this bylaws for dispensaries that open up? If you have regulations for dispensaries, they are enforced through normal regulatory affair enforcement, or you can set up a marijuana regulation department. That's fine. And then what they do is they make sure people are complying with the regulations that they are, that they have or that they have to comply to. And it's not a matter of police having to enforce that. So you could set up a tax system where you tax the dispensaries and then you use that money to set up a board where they decide on regulations, and then you have, just like building code inspectors and shit, they go around and enforce the regulations and make sure people are complying. All of that is available to you. Halifax Mayor Mike Savage said cities are asking the federal government for more details as early as the fall about how the law will impact them. Quote, we also need some clarity around the law so that we can be prepared to deal with dispensaries, many of whom think that they, as soon as this bill passes, can just open up anywhere they want. That's why you have things called ordinances, man. You are allowed to write an ordinance, and there's nothing in the law that I know of that says that you are, forced to have a dispensary in your municipality. There's no thing that says you can't write an ordinance saying that they can't open a dispensary. And in fact, I'm sure there's probably towns and municipalities all over Canada that have already wrote some kind of thing that will ban dispensaries in their location until blah, blah, blah. And, okay, so the one thing that of course concerns me is the timing of how quickly this is occurring. Is another one of these things. Oh, wait a minute. Several mayors say they feel that Trudeau liberals are moving at breakneck speed, leaving them little time to prepare for the new regime. You know what moved at breakneck speed, literally, that broke necks and put people in fucking prison? Is when you goddamn seen the government make marijuana illegal. I don't know exactly when that happened in Canada, but in America, it was in 1937. And in that, 80 years ago, this year, in that vein, they instantly arrested a person for trying to buy a marijuana tax stamp. So that was breakneck speed. I'm sure pretty much the same shit happened in Canada whenever it happened there. So what you're saying is, we need time to unwind this cool ass shit where we can arrest citizens for marijuana I don't understand your logic behind that shit. But, of course, they keep calling people liberals and conservatives, and it's just a big device game. You know what? Whether you ask somebody whether they're a liberal or a conservative, everybody is pretty much on board with you guys legalizing marijuana. And everybody would like to see a dispensary in their town. The liberals hope to make marijuana legal by the summer of 2018. I think that is the goal, is July 1st. One thing, of course, is the timing of how quickly this is occurring, especially given that I certainly have concerns about the likely increased costs of policing, says Winnipeg Mayor Brian Bowman. Again, talking about how fast it's happening, even though, you've had a lot of time. Trudeau's been there for a while, and that was one of his campaign promises to legalize marijuana. Idiot. Number two, you've had a lot of time. It's been over 2 years. And we're talking about July of 2018 still. We're not even talking about this year, so it ain't that fucking fast. You know what's fast? Go talk to Maine. Go talk to Massachusetts. Go talk to Colorado. They when they did it, it was like, okay, marijuana's legal now. And there wasn't no problem. Nobody got a broken neck. It wasn't breakneck. And guess what? Enforcement, there is no big deal about it. Go talk to the Denver police chief. Go talk to the guys, the police in Portland and Eugene, Oregon. Go talk to any police officers in any place that has medical marijuana where they're actually just letting people follow the laws of the state and not harassing people. There is no big deal about enforcement. As a matter of fact, the local police chief and the mayor in a town near me in Michigan, in Montrose, Michigan, their feelings about it are this. Oh, hey, we know where all the marijuana activity is happening. It's at that one place where it has a big marijuana sign out front, a big green cross, the medical marijuana dispensary. That's where all the marijuana stuff happens. And we don't have any problems with people crashing into each other because they're stoned. So all this shit talk about we need more ways to enforce the driving while impaired laws. You already can. If someone's driving like shit and you test them and they have marijuana in their system, you can give them a driving while impaired ticket right fucking now. And this law is not going to change that. There's nothing in there that changes that. Depending on how it's rolled out, depending on where the revenues are being collected and by whom, could play a role in helping us address our concerns and what we expect are going to be increasing costs of policing. You just want money. That's all it is, man. The government's legalization bill, C-45, was being debated at a second reading in the House of Commons on Friday, blocked away where thousands of delegates were gathered for an annual meeting of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Trudeau addressed the gathering in the morning after the official start of the annual meeting, focusing on what local leaders describe as an opioid epidemic in their communities. Oh, here we go again. Health officials and political leaders have been sounding the alarm about a dramatic spike in opioid deaths across Canada, the focus of a national summit in Ottawa last fall that pulled together experts from across the country. In his speech, Trudeau said governments won't rest until they turn the tide of the crisis, pointing to the government's latest budget as evidence of government's interest in addressing the problem. The budget included $110 million over 5 years for national drug strategy. Quote, the opioid epidemic has touched the lives of countless Canadians in one way or another. We must come together to address the crisis, and that's what we're working with our provincial, territorial, and municipal partners to finding lasting solutions. So, while you guys are over here bitching about marijuana, you're really just supposed to be there to talk about the opioid epidemic. And if you think you can mix the two, just look at the statistics in America. Wherever there's been marijuana legalized for medical purposes, the more access to the marijuana that patients have, the less opioid addiction there is, the less prescriptions are written for opioid pills, the less opioid overdose deaths there are, the less overdose admissions to the emergency room. All these numbers are going down not just a little, but by 20 to 25%. That is not a coincidence. That is not something, well, they always talk about these drugged driving. Well, in Colorado, the population increased nearly 400,000 people, and the number of people that was involved in driving impairment accidents remained the same. So it actually went down statistically when marijuana was legalized. And when it comes to people getting in car crashes on opioids, we never get the straight answer from autopsies, toxicology reports, etc., etc. So anytime that you see a marijuana-involved car crash statistics, you have to ask yourself, is that the only thing that showed up on the test? Because like everything else, marijuana stays in your system longer than any other drug. You can be high on a drug that isn't even in your system anymore. Marijuana, you can, like 99% of the time that it's in your system, you're not high. We're done with this. Thank you, Trudeau, but you're really, I don't know. Trudeau's not my favorite guy. I got my reasons, but the marijuana thing, I think, has been going too slow. And if you look at the comment section in there was one comment. As a matter of fact, let me see.
A new medical marijuana law set to hit the books in Michigan in 2018, and we're already seeing some local municipalities.
Don't know how that happens when you're not even there. All right. No, that's the wrong article anyway. Anyway, in the comment section of that article, you'll see some very interesting insight as to people's opinions, which are a lot like what you just heard me say. You know, this is not happening quick enough. All right, so we all remember President Trump and his little love affair with Duterte a couple weeks back. Well, now we have even more evidence of that as transcripts emerged of the phone conversation that Trump had with Duterte. And it's pretty despicable. It sucks, all right? I've been a lone voice in the wilderness just screaming off the top of my lungs about this fucking dickhead, Duterte. I'm not going to call him a dictator because he's been elected. He has a super high approval rating. You know what? None of that means fuck all to me because this guy's a liar and he's a fucking sadistic killer, really. If you look at his track record, even when he was mayor or governor or whatever he was, mayor of Dubois, this guy's a fucking criminal. He really is out there just to kill as many people as he can. And what did Trump think about it? What does Trump ever do that impresses anybody? I don't understand why people think Trump is good. He's got a lot of apologists, though, so I'm not going to fucking put my finger in Trump's chest too hard. He's just a piece of shit, is all I'm going to say. But he's pretty much, you know, if you want to blame somebody for all the shitty policies coming out since he's been president, I point my finger to Paul Ryan more than Trump. Trump's just in there for the ride. So anyway, Trump told Philippines counterpart that he was doing a good job fighting an illegal drug epidemic in his country, an effort that has led to thousands of deaths and has drawn international condemnations from human rights groups. Quote, I just wanted to congratulate you because I'm hearing of the unbelievable job on the drug problem, Trump said in an April 29th phone call, according to a leaked transcript of the conversation with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, published by The Intercept and also obtained by the Washington Post and the New York Times. Quote, many countries have the problem. We have the problem. But what a great job you're doing. And I just wanted to call and tell you that. There is not enough outrage about this conversation right here. Out of all the bullshit that is leaked out of Trump's mouth, this is probably the one that disgusts me the most. But in this same conversation, which I don't know if it's in this article, but Trump also fucking told Duterte about how he had some nuclear submarines out there off his coast, which is, my brother used to be in a nuclear submarine program, and I'm not even sure I'm allowed to say that. Like, it's one of the most top secret fucking things that the military even has going. It's called silent service because you're not supposed to know where the fucking subs are or when they are at certain places or where they dock or any of this shit, where they come up, which they hardly ever do for air. So, fuck, man. This is Trump. You're fucking president, man. As we know, Duterte's drug war has pretty much claimed the lives of about 9,000 people. At least. Duterte overbloats his statistics. doubling the number of actual drug addicts that are in his country. But the problem is you're going to war with drug addicts. What the fuck, man? That is exactly the opposite approach that you should be taking. So marijuana treatment reduces severe epileptic seizures. This normally I put all the health news in the back, but I felt like this is a very important story, and you know, you always get these dickheads like the DEA chief Rosenberg, and you got Chris Fat Fuck Christie. You know, they're talking about how marijuana is not medicine. That's some bullshit. I mean, it sounds like you're saying, you know, the earth is flat. It's really just comes across as being right off the bat, like, even if there was a way that you can bring yourself to come up with evidence to support your claim, it'd be too far of a reach at this point. Nobody would believe you. We have discovered there's an entire endocannabinoid system. Your body needs marijuana at this point. All right, medical researchers have confirmed what some desperate parents have been claiming for years. A non-psychoactive component of marijuana, known as cannabidiol, can reduce epileptic seizures in some children. Published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and this is Scientific American that I'm reading from, the findings stem from a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. The most scientifically rigorous type of investigation possible. The one that everybody always says, oh, but the FDA needs to have their studies. That's the kind of study that the FDA wants you to get to them. And I did a story where it talks about how many of these studies exist for marijuana, and it's in the thousands. And yet, when you got a drug like Adderall, there was only 2 of these such studies done before it got approved. So to say that there's no studies on marijuana being medicine is just horse shit. This study clearly establishes cannabidiol as an effective anti-seizure drug for the disorder in an age group, says principal investigator Oren Davinsky, director of the Comprehensive Epilepsy Center at New York University Langone Medical Center. Quote, it certainly deserves to be studied in other types of epilepsy. A total of 120 children and teenagers with Dravet syndrome, a rare disorder marked by a drug-resistant seizures that can be nearly continuous in some cases, were part of the study. They were divided into an experimental group which received the test drug, and a placebo group which was given a medically inactive compound. Over the course of 14 weeks, the youngsters received CBD experienced a medium number of 5.9 convulsive seizures per month, down from 12.4. That's over half, compared with 14.1 convulsions per month, down from 14.9. Which is probably just some normal ebb and flow of the number of seizures someone had. There's no way the placebo gave them less seizures. The new findings are consistent with previous, less stringent studies of the same drug, a compound called Epidiolex, made by a UK-based GW Pharmaceuticals. And GW happens to be who funded this study that we're talking about right now. As the current paper points out, interest in cannabidiol for the treatment of epilepsy is generated by media reports of efficacy in children with Dravet syndrome. The star of many of those reports was Charlotte Figi, now 10, of Colorado, who was having hundreds of seizures a month by age 3 when her parents decided to treat her with cannabidiol. Unlike the better-known marijuana component tetrahydrocannabinol, cannabidiol does not make users high. Boo-hoo. 29 states and the District of Columbia have legalized marijuana for medical use, and the conditions approved for treatment can vary from state to state. 16 states have laws that specifically allow the use of CBD to treat seizures. Basically, if it wasn't for the original situation with the Fijis, this study probably would have never even, came to light, or there wouldn't have been enough anecdotal evidence. But Charlotte's Web basically revolutionized the thinking in, cannabis as medicine, because nobody ever thought before of this application until it happened. And then, I'm sure Charlotte was not the very first ever person to be treated with CBD for the seizures, but the most famous for sure. And I can only say thank you to the Fiji family. And I love it that what you guys have done and what Jason has done and everybody else involved in the project. I don't know if that's Jason's project or not, but whatever the case is, whoever worked on that, that was awesome. I still think there needs to be more studies done because this study, to me, didn't sound that I mean, it was great, very conclusive, but we need to hammer this home. We need to, I mean, if the videos aren't freaking letting people know enough, like you see a video where someone is given this while they're having a seizure and boom, the seizure stops. If that's not enough, I don't know what we need, but this is what the government's asking for, and here it is. So why are you on Schedule 1 again? 62% of caregivers in the cannabidiol group said their child's overall condition improved during the trial compared with 34% in the placebo group. After the trial, caregivers of participants in both placebo and experimental groups were given the option of continuing treatment with cannabidiol in what is called an open-label extension of the study. More than 100 families from both groups took researchers up on the offer. Yeah, even if you were in the placebo group and you've seen how good it worked, you'd be like, well, yeah. Davinsky hopes the latest findings will persuade the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration to change its classification of marijuana as a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act, a ruling that hampers medical research and treatment. Drugs on Schedule I, such as heroin, are deemed by the DEA to have no currently acceptable medical use. To put CBD as a Schedule I violates scientific data and common sense, Davinsky says. He points out that some opiates, which kill thousands of Americans a year, are Schedule III drugs, a less restricted category. Cannabis is approved in 20 countries for spasms and multiple sclerosis, he says. So to say there's no evidence of efficacy is simply untrue. Those studies came out a decade ago. This study is coming out today. They have to deschedule this drug. It's just not fair to the research and clinical communities or to the patients. It's medieval. I love that. But it is medieval. If you were a politician that don't think that marijuana should be legal today or descheduled, I give you the Dravet's challenge. I want you to go to where Dravet's is existing, where cannabis is not legal. There's very few places left in America where that's the case. But even the places where it is legal, like 18 some odd states that don't have better marijuana laws than just, oh yeah, we're not going to arrest you if you use CBD. You don't have anything for where you're going to get it or any of that shit. But anyway, go to one of those places, hang out with a family for like a day that has Dravet's, that has a child with Dravet's that can't access CBD. I hope the kid lives through that day. And then go to somewhere where CBD's, go to Colorado or whatever and hang out with somebody there that has the same situation, only they have cannabis. And you tell me what the fuck you think should happen. Schedule 1? Are you fucking kidding? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, man. And it's a fucking plant. It's all natural. That's the whole problem that the government has with marijuana being medicine. Is they want to be able to have little doses of it that they can make a penny off of each one. They don't want anybody out there making any money that they don't get a big hefty sum out of. That's why it's not legal to buy a still. You can't even buy a still without a blueprint for how you're going to pay the government some of the money off of it. So anyway, going forward, GW Pharmaceuticals plans to seek U.S. FDA approval of Epidiolex in the next few months as a treatment for Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, another seizure disorder. No one really knows yet how cannabidiol reduces seizures in Dravet. That's another study I want to know. I want to know exactly what is the mechanics behind this, because that's what they would say. And I know it's something that you can't refute. There's no way you can be like, oh, okay, then this is not medicine after knowing how exactly it works on Dravet's. Davinsky says the leading theory is that the cannabidiol binds to a receptor in nerve cells called GPR55, modulating the calcium activity and excitability of the cells. He also says cannabidiol has many other effects on nerve cells and that there is much to learn. I've heard it regenerates nerve cells and fixes nerve damage. And this is studies that are just as rigorous as this one. For Rigio, a gold standard double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trial will do just fine for now. It's exciting because it's a new option for people who feel like they're out of options. And it confirms what we've seen anecdotally. And the more data we have to back that up, the more confidence we have to use this sooner and hopefully avoid a lot of side effects that my daughter had to endure. And it is true that in some of these states that have the CBD laws, they say, like, I think Georgia was one of them. Maybe they changed it in their updates that they did last year and that passed this year. But anyway, they're basically saying that you have to exhaust all these other options. And some of these options are like crystal meth type Adderall shit and benzodiazepines and other antipsychotics. And we're talking about for seizures. I've even heard like Vicodin or hydrocodone being used. None of that's good. None of that is good. Medical marijuana. Oh, here's another national story. I felt like as a health story, we had to throw this up into the mix with just national stories. So, Veteran Affairs Secretary David Shulkin said medical marijuana could help veterans. A major split in tone from others in the Trump administration. But like many in the Trump administration, this guy's probably just a leftover from the Obama administration. He didn't really do anything when Obama was around. So what's the conversation now? But anyway, besides that, so again, you're saying marijuana is medicine. He said medical marijuana could help vets. So that's a government person saying marijuana is medicine. We're going to keep hearing examples of this time and time again. Remember, they have a patent. Says marijuana is medicine. There may be some evidence that this is the beginning of to be helpful, and we're interested in looking at and learning from that. Shulkin said about medical use for the drug for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder in states with medical marijuana laws. If there is compelling evidence that this is helpful, I hope that people take a look at that and come up with the right decision. He said during a White House press briefing, pointing out that the VA is barred from federal law from giving veterans prescriptions for pot to help deal with issues of depression, suicidal thoughts, and other concerns. Congress recently changed the rules so VA doctors can now discuss medical marijuana with patients in a state where it's legal for the first time, but they still can't prescribe the drug. Well, that's funny because nobody can prescribe the drug. Doctors can give recommendations, and recommendations can be confidential under seal of a court order in some states. Anyway, Shulkin suggested that the VA will look into studying what effects medical marijuana is having on veterans in states where it's legal. Good news, we have some studies for you on that. You just have to look them up, but I'm about to dig one up a little bit later in the show. Shulkin's comments came in response to a question about a recent letter from the American Legion, a major veterans group known for its conservative lean, advocating for a reevaluation of the VA's current rules against medical marijuana while taking up its potential to lower veterans' suicide rates. About 20 veterans take their lives every day. So, it's basically, once again, it's the opposite of compassion. What the federal government is doing with marijuana is total and complete medieval fucking bullshit. Speaking of medieval bullshit, the Office of Drug Control Policy, as it turns out, right along with the DEA, seems to me, and even Tom Angel will say this in this article, these guys only exist to keep marijuana illegal, man. That's all. Of course they were, when you're talking about things down the line like cocaine, crack, heroin, meth, yeah, duh. But they really don't go out on a limb fighting those things to keep those things illegal. I don't think they really have to. At this point in time, their only excuse to exist is to fucking throw a wrench at any kind of effort marijuana legalization poses And it threatens their budget, and it threatens the budget of all kinds of agencies. The government is just full of people that make money off of marijuana being illegal. Not because they make literal dollars because it's illegal, just because they exist. And this is one of the offices. And Trump defunded it like 90%, I think, in his budget. I don't know if that passed. If you're trying to cut money off the federal budget, that's probably a good place to start. And then all the policies that these guys come up with probably should look into reversing. Officials at the Office of National Drug Control Policy under President Barack Obama wanted to take a more lenient stance on marijuana, with one former office telling HuffPost that the staff pushed to ease federal prohibition against the drug, but they never made that case directly to the public. Sure. The Office of National Drug Control Policy was in favor of decriminalizing but not legalizing, explained former Deputy Director A. Thomas McClellan, who worked in the White House office during Obama's first term. Such a policy shift could have gotten a shot of momentum to the efforts to relax marijuana laws across the country, but it never happened in large part because officials were worried about it would consume the office at a time when they needed to focus on the more pressing issue of the opioid epidemic. So again, the excuse for not moving on just getting rid of stupid laws that make marijuana illegal, which sounds easy to me. Oh, we can't be bothered with that because we're too bogged down in the opioid epidemic, which you didn't do fuck all about. You guys made it worse. You know, the ONDCP, which is more commonly known as the Drug Czar's Office, also determined that it couldn't publicly support decriminalizing marijuana because of a provision in the legislation that authorized its existence. The bipartisan 1988 law that created the Drug Czar's Office declared that the legalization of illegal drugs is an unconscionable surrender in the war on drugs. A later measure reauthorizing the office stipulated that no federal funds be used to study the legalization of marijuana or other Schedule I drugs, so that office had to oppose any attempt to legalize cannabis. As long as the language existed, Obama-era staffers felt limited in their ability to speak out, let alone signal real support for decriminalization. It forced the office to take a policy position that it may or may not agree to. Bullshit, you guys just don't care. It hamstring you into a policy position that might be the policy of the day, but might change. The anti-marijuana language in the statute not only hamstrung the office in taking new policy positions, it encouraged pro-marijuana activists to question the office's credibility on the issue. The existence of that statute, that prohibition, has been something that our movement has held up to criticize the ONDCP, said Tom Angel, the founder of Marijuana Majority. Taking that off the table would be good for us. It would also be good for them. It makes them look political in ways that their scientists probably don't want to be. Officials within the Drug Czar's office during Obama administration agree with Angel. Many suggested privately that the statute undermined their authority. Quote, it makes it look like the office's primary purpose is to oppose marijuana. Of course it is. That's what I said. The statute also made answering questions about marijuana policy complicated. When Botticelli was deputy within the office, Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, introduced legislation to remove the by then controversial language on marijuana. The bill went nowhere. Botticelli struggled to even answer the question on the subject. I think the question to him was, how can you have marijuana on the same schedule as heroin? Can't you admit that marijuana is not dangerous like heroin's dangerous? And he couldn't say it. His tongue was tied. Botticelli declared the war on drugs was a failure in 2015. On 60 Minutes, he said, "We can't arrest and incarcerate addiction out of people. Not only do I think it's really inhumane, but it's ineffective. And it costs us billions upon billions of dollars to keep doing this." Later in the interview, Botticelli was asked about legalizing marijuana, not just decriminalizing penalty for its use. He said he was against states commercializing the drug because it becomes an addiction to, unfortunately, a tax revenue that has often based on bad public health policy. Bullshit. You know what tax revenue policy is bad for public health? It's fucking casino gaming. That's bad public health policy. but you're raising money on that one. The closest Botticelli came to addressing the decriminalization issue directly occurred when District of Columbia residents voted to ease restriction on marijuana use. Quote, I might not agree with legalization, but I do agree with our own ability to spend our money the way we want to, he said. Neither he or his office would go much further than that during the 8 years of the Obama presidency. Had they done so, they would have incurred blowback from both parties in Congress and alienated drug prevention advocates who oppose marijuana use. More importantly, the controversy would likely have distracted from a more critical opioid epidemic. Come on with this shit. The crisis ended up driving home the argument for a public health approach to drug addiction. You have to figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze, said the former drug czar employee. No, you don't. You guys, you got 360 fucking days a year to do something, man. Are you saying you are so busy every day of the year working on the opioid epidemic, you can't cross off a few prohibition laws? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Alright, so now you guys got all these goons in there that don't want marijuana legal. So yeah, now you're moving backwards instead of forwards. Instead of moving forward, you shouldn't have moved forward so slow. Remember Canada? We're moving too fast. Maybe you guys move so so slow that you don't look very smart. That's all I can really say about that. So finally, the last holdout in New England was New Hampshire. New Hampshire is now poised to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. I'm not going to read this one because whatever. It's about time, guys. This is just kind of an update to a story I did before. It didn't pass. It hasn't passed the Senate up until now. It just passed the Senate last week, and now Sununu said he was going to sign it. My favorite quote out of here is, it's been a long time coming, but New Hampshire is finally moving towards adopting marijuana policies that are consistent with the state's live free or die motto, said Matt Simon, New England political director of the Marijuana Policy Project. And then a Democrat says it makes no sense for New Hampshire to be an outlier, putting people in prison for possessing small amounts of pot. You guys are kind of an outlier on legalized marijuana at this point. As soon as Virginia actually pulls the trigger later this year, it's going to be basically like you're going to be the only one left besides Connecticut and New York. That's about all for here. But there is also another bill on his desk talking about adding chronic pain and PTSD as qualifying conditions for the state's medical marijuana law. So yeah, that would be nice. But the state's 4 approved dispensaries might not be able to handle the influx of patients if you actually expand it that widely. Just saying. So good luck over there in New England. Court order to delay retail marijuana sales. This is another update. Before I said that, these gangster-ass alcohol board people, whatever they're called, the alcoholic fuckers, they really want their piece of this pie chart. They think they're entitled to. And this is some bullshit, man. Let me tell you. That anybody would have to wait longer to see something happen because these stupid gangster thugs act like they want a piece of the pie. And as it turns out, they don't even want it. So Nevada July 1 rollout of recreational marijuana sales could be in jeopardy after a district court judge signed a temporary restraining order. Judge on Tuesday signed an order prohibiting the Department of Taxation from enforcing a May 31st license application deadline for the state's recently approved Early Start program. The Independent Alcohol Distributors of Nevada filed a complaint arguing that the November voter-approved ballot measure that legalized cannabis in Nevada gives liquor wholesalers exclusive rights to marijuana distribution licenses for the first 18 months of sales in the state. I kind of want to see that where it actually says that, because I don't even believe it. Despite that claim, tax commissioners approved temporary regulations on May 8th to give tax department discretion in doling out licenses for marijuana distributors. Distributors will be responsible for transporting marijuana products from cultivation and production facilities to dispensaries. Why do we even need them? Everybody can drive their own shit to the next spot that it needs to go to. Sometimes this place is all in one. Statute clearly gives priority and exclusive license to alcohol distributors in order to promote the goal of regulating marijuana similar to alcohol, the judge ruled. That doesn't make any sense. You're trying to act like you got to have these distributors in place for the regulation to work like it does for alcohol. No, it don't. That's a small part of it, man. That's just your way of keeping track of stuff that you know you're getting money from, I guess. The attorney representing the wholesalers said Wednesday that the order will likely delay expected July 1st start recreational marijuana sales, but he said the group's intent is not to delay those sales. Whatever. We just want our rightful place. We don't want to slow down this inordinately. Wow, you want your rightful place? Why don't you put in your rightful application like everybody else, and we'll see who gets licenses. You guys don't get the monopoly on shit. I don't think that was written into any law. It's illegal to write a monopoly into a law, dummy.
A new medical marijuana law said
hit the books in 2018, and we're already seeing some local municipalities.
Yeah, we know. Part of the issue the department cited was liquor distributors are licensed on the federal level where marijuana remains illegal, and acting as a distributor of marijuana could put those licenses at risk. Yeah, that's why nobody's actually put in for one of these licenses, dummy. In March, the department decided that it would open the applications for distribution licenses beyond alcohol distributors because nobody had put in any interest and no one had shown interest. Tax Department Director Dion Cantine said in several meetings that the industry needed licensed distributors under Question 2 or the industry could not operate. The order issued Tuesday means that the department cannot issue licenses to anyone except licensed liquor wholesalers. Tax Department spokeswoman Stephanie Clapstein said the only one licensed alcohol wholesaler had applied for a marijuana distribution license, and that application came in Wednesday morning. Last minute. It sounds to me like the wholesalers, the actual wholesalers, and the this independent alcohol distributors of Nevada, they're not communicating very well with each other. Clapstein said the department expects a hearing to be set in the next couple of weeks. The department is reviewing the temporary restraining order with legal counsel, and we intend to defend our regulations to the fullest extent of the law. Arman Yamanidjian, CEO of Essential Cannabis Dispensaries of Las Vegas, said requiring a third-party distributor for marijuana baffles him. Now, I've been saying this ever since I've heard about these stupid transporters and shit. He cited the same argument the tax department initially made, that he doesn't understand why alcohol distributors would risk losing their federal license. And logistically, he said, one move doesn't add up. The move doesn't add up. His cultivation facility is less than a mile from his dispensary, he said. Other companies have cultivation centers located on the same property as its dispensary. In those cases, the companies would need to pay a distributor to take the marijuana products from one room in a building to another. It doesn't make any sense, he said. Should the Early Start program be delayed, the impact could go beyond local businesses losing out on revenue and marijuana users having access to the product. Governor Brian Sandoval's proposed budget is based on sales starting on July 1st and calls for nearly $70 million in taxes over the next 2 fiscal years to fund the state's public education fund. Wow, so you need this money to pay for school. Good job, people delaying it. Alcoholics. That new tax has yet to be approved by the state legislature, which is scheduled to adjourn on Monday. The governor's office declined to comment on Wednesday. Here's your court papers for that crap. And yeah. Once again, I don't think they had their... when you write a proposal for a law and you have all these different interests, like the police and the alcohol distributors and all these other people that think that they're getting threatened because you're going to legalize marijuana. They all come with their hands out like, give us some money. Next thing you know, it costs more to fucking run a regulated marijuana business than it does to fucking go buy shit from the cartels. Patients aren't going to put up with this shit. Regular people that smoke marijuana for recreational purposes aren't going to put up with that shit. Like I said about Canada, you have all these people that are always trying to do this shit. Maine city to ban marijuana in wake of legalization. Because that's what you want to do when your state legalizes something. You want to make it illegal still. That doesn't make a fucking damn bit of sense, dude. A Maine city is considered banning the sale of marijuana, at least temporarily, while the state works on rules governing the legal sale of the drug. Saco officials will put the city's proposal up for the first reading on June 5th. The city administrator described the move as prohibition of marijuana sales for 1 year, which the city will decide what it wants to do for the long term. Voters in Maine legalized marijuana for recreational use last November. State officials are working on regulations about how the drug can be legally sold to consumers. Cities and towns around the state have been adopting moratoriums on sales until rules are finalized, but Saco's approach is slightly different. Moratoriums last for only 180 days. Remember, these guys are going for a whole year. But whatever, that's fine. Do what you want, but you can't ban marijuana. Like that's what the government has been trying to do this shit for 80 fucking years. This year is the 80th anniversary of prohibition of marijuana. And do you see any problem getting marijuana? Didn't do a very good job of controlling it, did you? Nope. Well, then how the fuck do you think you can ban marijuana? You can't. The only thing you can ban is the legitimate sale of marijuana. And when you do that, then the black market comes in and sells it for you. You don't have any kind of control over the black market. When the black market's selling the marijuana, they sell it to whoever comes along. And they also have other things to sell with it, like guns and dangerous narcotics. Shitty street drugs that have no testing. Texas marijuana reform laws fail in the legislature. Again, I apologize to Texas for this bullshit. 85th legislative session is officially over. Thousands of bills were filed, but only a few hundred made it through. Despite a big push this year, marijuana reform advocates were among those who saw their priorities fall flat. They held their biggest advocacy day ever and made personal pleas on the steps of the state capitol. Still, those pushing to broaden Texas' Compassionate Use Act came up short. Quote, it certainly is disappointing that meaningful legislation reform didn't happen this session, I should say, said Heather Fazio, Marijuana Policy Project Director for Texas. We had bipartisan approach. We had 77 co-authors in the House on that legislation that were supportive of its efforts, and we were not successful this legislative session, said Representative Jason Isaac, Republican of Dripping Springs. State lawmakers created the Compassionate Use Act back in 2015. It allows doctors to recommend a marijuana extract called CBD oil to treat children with certain forms of epilepsy. Wow, that's really compassionate. But advocates say the current law leaves many patients and parts of the plant out. Autism, terminally ill cancer patients, other people with neurological disorders, said Isaac. Isaac fought to let doctors decide which part of the plant is best for patients. He also wanted to expand who could use medical marijuana. We wanted to expand that to include autism, terminally ill cancer patients, other people with neurological disorder. We had a bipartisan approach. We had 77 co-authors in the House that supported this effort. We're not successful this session. A little repetitious. Another bill marijuana reform advocates wanted to see passed was the legislation that would have decriminalized the possession of small amounts of marijuana. Come on, guys. You couldn't even get decriminalization through there. That was like you had every possible marijuana outcome that there was on the table. It's kind of like when you get booked in for a bunch of shit by the cops. You know, they throw the book at you and there's like 10 tickets. And then when you get to the judge, they're like, well, we'll drop all these if you plead guilty to this one. it's kind of what you thought was going to happen with decriminalization. Like, oh, yeah, those are all fine and dandy, but you know what? We'll let this one slide through. Not even that. So meanwhile, we have between 60,000 and 70,000 Texans are arrested annually for the simple possession of marijuana. Unbelievable. There's where all your money is going in your criminal justice system, is to manage marijuana arrests and cases. Fucking insanity. We're going to continue to stay engaged, educate lawmakers, empower families and individuals that have stories to tell, because that's really what moves the ball on this issue. Didn't move it very far in Texas, guys. And I've heard that it's 80% of Republicans and 90% of Democrats want medical marijuana to be legal. California lawmakers defy federal drug laws. Federal drug war. California legislature passed 2 bills in defiance of the federal prohibition of marijuana and other drugs this week. And this is written by Tom Angel, Marijuana Majority. First, on Thursday, the State Assembly approved a measure that would prevent local police from assisting federal law enforcement agents in actions against marijuana activity that is legal under state law. Even as a growing number of states have legalized medical or recreational marijuana, the federal government largely dialed down interference during the second term of the Obama administration. The DEA has, in some cases, sought to go after people complying with state cannabis laws. And local law enforcement officials have sometimes been involved in resulting raids and arrests, and investigations as well. That would not be allowed in California bill if this California bill is enacted, leaving the U.S. Justice Department to enforce federal laws entirely on its own. The bill, quote, ensures that our limited local and state resources are not spent on federal marijuana enforcement against individuals and entities that are in compliance with our laws, Assemblyman Reggie Jones-Sawyer, Democrat, the bill's lead sponsor, said during a floor debate, according to the LA Times. Assemblyman Rob Bonta, Democrat, added, people who are compliant with California law and operate within the legal cannabis market should not have to fear that a state or local agency will participate in the efforts to punish or incarcerate them for activity that the state and its voters have deemed legal. Law enforcement has lobbied strenuously against the legislation, AB 1578, suggesting that it could hamper their ability to conduct and assist in investigations that might uncover marijuana or other drug activity that is not legal in California. If it's not legal in California, then good. You're allowed to investigate it and give all your assistance to the federal agents. We're not stopping you from that. Just if somebody is complying with your state's law and the feds are trying to fuck with them, then you're not supposed to fucking help them with that. I don't see how there's a problem there. Oh, now I do, because you guys are never happy. Law enforcement is never happy with anything that happens when marijuana gets legalized for any reason. Los Angeles Times editorial board, which supported Proposition 64, the voter-approved measure that made marijuana legal in California last November, also came out against the so-called sanctuary state bill. Quote, local authorities often work with federal agencies on investigations that may uncover both state and federal violations, such as money laundering, diverting marijuana out of state for sales, and environmental damage from outdoor pot farms, the board wrote. The Jones-Sawyer bill would likely bar such cooperation if the target of the investigation is a licensed cannabis business in California, but just because an entity is licensed doesn't mean it's following the law. Then, if you know that it's not, then you can go ahead. So quit acting like that just because somebody has a marijuana license, they could be doing something completely bullshit illegal, like exporting marijuana to states that don't have, legalized marijuana, and basically drug smuggling and making money in the illegal black market. That's all illegal. You can fucking go after them. You can assist the feds in busting them too. So that shit wouldn't fucking affect that at all. Quit acting like it is. Quit acting like, oh, my hands are tied. This guy's got a license, so he can do anything he fucking wants. You guys know that ain't true, all right? You just want to kick doors in. That's what you want to do. You want to kick fucking doors in, write people tickets, and then let them deal with the fucking lawyers and the judges and all that shit. But it did pass so far 41 to 33. Also on Thursday, the Assembly voted 41 to 33 to approve a separate bill to permit facilities where people can consume illegal drugs in spaces supervised by trained medical professionals. So-called safe injection sites have seen success in Canada, Australia, Germany, and elsewhere. Studies indicate that they reduce overall overdoses as well as transmission of HIV and hepatitis. They also increase access to drug treatment services. The bill, AB 186, would create a pilot program that allows cities and towns to permit the facilities and provide state and legal protection to operators and staff. Quote, California is blazing a new trail towards a policy on drug addiction and abuse that treats it as a medical issue and a public health challenge that it is, and not as a moral failing. The bill's sponsor, Assembly member Susan Talamantes Eggman, said in a press release sent by the Drug Policy Alliance. Quote, we are in the midst of an epidemic, and this bill will grant us another tool to fight it, to provide better access to services like treatment and counseling, and to better protect public health and safety, and to save lives. And addict lives matter, guys. So if someone's a drug addict, that's who we're talking about. We want them to be safe too, and people around them. Other potential addicts. The Assemblyman's action marks the first time in U.S. history that a legislative body has approved such a bill. The state of San Francisco recently created a task force to explore allowing supervised consumption services. Both bills are now head to the Senate and, if approved there, to the desk of Governor Jerry Brown. Moving right along, also in California, we have the first ever cannabis festival that was going to be held in Del Mar Fairgrounds has been canceled for now. Del Mar Fairgrounds Board of Directors hosted a public meeting Tuesday night to allow citizens and groups to voice their reasons why or why not the medical marijuana festival scheduled for September 23rd should be canceled. The hours-long meeting concluded with a decision to cancel it, but board members told organizers they'd consider the festival if new guidelines eliminate guests from smoking marijuana at the event. Months ago, fairground officials had approved a contract with organizers for the Good Life Festival. They billed it as an educational event about medical marijuana. Attendees would have had to be at least 21 years old. Only medical marijuana prescription card holders would be able to bring it to the venue and smoke it in designated areas according to event organizers. So this is a discrimination move against people using their medicine. This isn't even about recreational marijuana here. This is saying that, yo, hey, I don't give a fuck if your medicine is marijuana, and if your preferred method of introducing your medicine into your body is smoking, we're not allowing it here. We don't like that. And they're even talking about having designated areas where it wouldn't affect anybody around them. You know, I'm guessing, I've been to these kind of events before. The designated areas are off to the side. There's a layer of stuff between that and the rest of the crowd, and nobody can even smell that you're smoking marijuana in that area. So as many as 6,000 people have confirmed online that they're interested in going to the festival. The anticipation of large crowds caused residents and anti-drug activists to voice their opposition. Oh my. So they just don't like big crowds and parties and shit. The major concerns were whether or not the event was legal according to federal law. Who cares? Nothing is legal according to federal law. And if medical marijuana patients were allowed to smoke weed at the fairgrounds located on 22 Jimmy Durant Boulevard. Nice name of a road, by the way. I bet you Jimmy Durant would be like, yeah, have the party and smoke the weed. And it's medicine, so fuck you for discriminating against people using their medicine. You asshole. No California official wants to put their name on a document that is contrary to federal law when you have an attorney general like Jeff Sessions. Festival organizer Lawrence Bain said. And that's the kind of shit that I said in my video about the DEA Chief Rosenberg talking shit about marijuana is not medicine and all this. Basically, you give fuel to douchebags like this, and so does Jeff Sessions. This guy was like, whoa, nobody well, if I put my name on it, Jeff Sessions is going to come and cut my head off because he's the boogeyman. You know, this is some bullshit. Like, you guys are ruled by fear, is what it sounds like there, buddy. They call this the Good Life Festival, but it's just drug use, said Scott Chipman, an opponent of the festival. You know, how many people are walking around right now on Vicodins or Xanax or something? You know, I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying they're allowed to use their fucking medicine. You don't criticize them. And you see someone throwing a fucking pill in their mouth, you're like, oh, okay, I hope you get better. Our show is not about breaking laws. It's not about breaking rules. It's about providing information, Bame said. We're not selling any cannabis. The Good Life Festival organizer is the same group that hosts the Del Mar Home and Garden Show. Doesn't sound like a bunch of unruly people trying to smoke your town down. Sounds like people that were being responsible. They had their shit set up like an educational situation, and they have designated areas for people to medicate. So unbelievable, man. And that's California. Hard to believe. I don't even believe it, but it's what's going on. So Vermont could have been, should have been, would have been the first state to legislatively legalize marijuana, and still could be. So the buck stopped at Governor Phil Scott's desk, as I knew it would, for no other reason than that he's a Republican and that he already said that he was going to veto any kind of, that he wasn't ready and all this shit. His rhetoric has not changed since the election. He didn't run on, you know, hey, I'm not going to let these fools legalize marijuana, but he didn't run against that either. He didn't, when asked, he was like, I'm not really, you know, on board. And let's see what he says. So he rejected a bill allowed for possession of small amounts of marijuana. The measure also created a commission to study how to set up a regulated adult use market in the state, which recommendations on how it might work delivered by November. It did not create a regulated adult use market such as voter pass measures did in 8 states, including Colorado, Washington, and California, a distinction lost in many media reports. Scott, a Republican, rejected it. I don't know what. Oh, yeah. So this is the legislatively, thing I already said. But anyway, however, he made it clear he's not opposed to legalization and left the door open for compromise. The only roadblock to completing a deal would likely be members of his own party. Exactly. So the other states have legalized. Vermont lawmakers wanted to make possession legal through legislation and also set up a commission that could eventually recommend how the state could create, regulate, tax, and adult use marijuana market. Other states watch closely to see how things would turn out in Vermont. Some lawmakers in Illinois, for example, are considering introducing similar legislation. Their issue mirrors that in other states. They want the tax money marijuana brings in to help balance the state budget. For Scott, marijuana legalization prevents a bit of legal quagmire. A Republican serving in his first year in office, Scott has politicians in his party vehemently opposed to legalized adult use marijuana. However, the bill passed by the legislature by a narrow margin had approval of 57% of the state's voters, according to the survey from March. Scott told reporters after his veto of the bill that he is not philosophically opposed to eliminating prohibition on marijuana. He just wants some changes. Actually, the changes Scott wants were relatively minor, leading Vermont newspaper The Burlington Free Press to report there might be a deal by summer. Most of Scott's issues are about kids and time. Time again. This is like Canada, huh? Longer sentences for those who use marijuana in front of children, huh? Or offer it to children, as well as more severe penalties for driving under the influence of marijuana. Now, I've heard a lot about this driving under the influence. Oh, we need more budget money to enforce this, and we need a test for that, and all this, and blah, blah, blah. You don't hear too many people asking for more severe penalties for driving under the influence of marijuana. So that's a little horse shitty right there. And by the way, when you're talking about this shit, why don't you look to where it's already been legalized? This legalization of marijuana for adult use in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, other places has not resulted in an increase in teen use. So this children thing, I don't even know what the fuck this is about. And as well as, the driving on marijuana thing, people are doing it every day, man, and you aren't seeing people, there's no real demand for stiffer penalties. If you look at Colorado, once again, the number of people that have been involved in marijuana impaired car accidents and incidents or whatever has basically remained the same. Those studies are so weak too. Like you never really know if it's just marijuana, but I guarantee you it's fucking not ever just marijuana. So there is no proof that this shit's even dangerous. The Vermont legislature goes back into session in late June, and there could be a compromise worked out there. State Senator Dick Sears, a Democrat, told Free Press, "It's not a slam dunk, but it's possible." And of course, it's the Republicans, including Representative Don Turner. The majority of Republican lawmakers remain opposed to legalization and will not likely change their minds. Call up your representatives there, people in Vermont. See if you can't change their minds. Clinton Township, Michigan. I believe we just watched this video.
7 Action News reporter Matthew Smith is
Seven
live
Action
for
News
us
reporter
in
Matthew
Clinton
Smith
Township
is
this
live for us
morning,
in
where a new
Clinton
committee
Township
is
this
being
morning, where a
formed to
new
weigh
committee is
new
being
options.
formed
Yeah.
to weigh new
Yeah, and
options
being
map.
formed because of that.
Yeah, and
new
being
law
formed
gives them
because
new
of that
powers
new
here at the
law
municipal
gives them new
level.
powers here at the municipal.
Just had a little technical difficulty there. Hopefully everything turns out okay in the end. But so what about this Clinton Township thing? It looks like they're doing what you're supposed to be doing because, the law that the legislator passed and the governor signed basically says that if you're a municipality, you have to have a decision made by now as to whether or not you're going to have your regulations set up and ready to go so that an application can be handed out in December of this year for facilities. So it just sounds to me like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if you're one of those municipalities that hasn't done this, then you're just doing a disservice to yourself, it sounds like, because you could be collecting on these fees, which, as they say, can be up to $5,000 for these zoning fees or whatever. I think you can even... licenses can be costing even more than that when we're talking about growing facilities, dispensaries, testing facilities, the secure transporter, the whole gambit of marijuana businesses. So, all right, whatever, Clinton Township, just doing what they're supposed to, I guess. This is not cool, though. These guys are not supposed to be doing this. When you're shutting these dispensaries down and calling them pot shots, first of all, Fox 2, fuck you, man. This whole article is a smear piece. City Councilman Melvin Butch Howell says more than 100 facilities have been closed since they enacted these new ordinances about the medical marijuana dispensaries. We have shut down 167 facilities, he says. 51 still remain to be closed down, but we've been vigilant enforcing the City Council's ordinance. Remember the City Council ordinance? It expanded the limits to where you could have dispensaries by creating basically no safe zone for a dispensary. The biggest obstacle that one might find in trying to have a dispensary is the liquor license, the liquor store clause. So let's check it out. Our inspection team will knock on the door of the facility, says Hollowell. If they're not allowed in, they will kick down the door. I will file an action in Wayne County Circuit Court to ask the court to give me an order of closure and padlocking. Activist Winifred Blackmon says he's been working for years to get medical marijuana facilities operating illegal out of his community. This is one right here on the corner in violation of 1,000-foot spacing of a controlled use. Controlled use is a liquor store. This asshole don't give a fuck about the liquor stores, though. The whole problem with this ordinance that prevents marijuana dispensaries from opening up near liquor stores is you're talking about Detroit, where there's a liquor store on every corner. Why don't we just look at that for a second and maybe lower the number of liquor stores or make it so liquor stores can't be within 1,000 feet of each other?
Because currently they are within 1,000 feet of each other. So whatever, man. This guy's not an activist. He's an assholeist. It's a great ordinance. It's working, but as the law department will tell you, it's not the best ordinance. It's not working as fast as we would like to see it, but something is better than nothing. What fucking more do you want, man? You said out of about 200 facilities, 150 of them have been shut down. You want 0 marijuana facilities. Meanwhile, you shut them down and people just start selling weed right in the same spot where that fucker was, generating revenue, maybe for you too if you wanted it. City Council continues its effort to shut down these centers operating illegally in the city of Detroit. Nice way to paint it, Fox. The only reason they're illegal is because of this fucking liquor store clause. That's it. They'll be also talking about key issues surrounding marijuana at the policy conference on Mackinac Island. I haven't heard of this policy conference. Maybe it's just the assholes that want to shut down marijuana that are having this conference. We're keeping an eye on whether or not the legalization, not just for medical purposes of marijuana, very well may be on the ballot next year, he says. There is an effort well underway statewide to put it on the ballot next year. We don't know if it will be successful, but we certainly won't be caught by surprise. What's the big deal, dude? Are you like out there protecting the black market or something? I don't understand what the fuck your issue is. You just want no marijuana pot shops, whether the shit's legal or not. You don't give a fuck about the legality. We just don't want people openly selling marijuana legally. So whatever, dude. It'll be sold illegally. Who cares? It's getting sold no matter what. People are buying and using it every fucking day. So all you're doing is cutting off your own fingers on getting a piece of the pie, like everybody else is trying to do. Maybe you just don't see it like that. Maybe you see it like there's no way for you to get a piece of the pie, so you just want to shut it down for everybody. Meanwhile, you're perfectly fine with having liquor stores on every corner in every neighborhood, and liquor is basically like one of the ruined nations of this whole country. You know, you got like, it's breaking families up. It's causing people to get in fatal car crashes on a damn hourly basis. You know, just drinking too much of it can actually kill you. People are filling hospitals up every day with fucking liver problems and kidney problems and heart problems and all these problems from liquor. But those are okay to have on every corner. Marijuana may fight Alzheimer's. What will that mean to baby boomers? Who cares? I mean, what will it really mean is to the children of the baby boomers. We're all sitting back here wondering what the fuck's going to happen to you guys. And I'm really concerned for like my parents because they don't use marijuana. They're against it, or they don't accept it as medicine. Or they watch fucking Fox News until that wasn't right-wing enough for them. And in their Alex Jonesy world, they're not getting this information about Alzheimer's. We seen Alzheimer's take my grandpa out, man. If it wasn't Alzheimer's, full-on Alzheimer's, it was dementia, which is bad enough. Dementia is like the bad part of Alzheimer's. And I'll tell you what, it's fucking horrific. To live through that was my grandpa. I hardly even cared about the guy while he was alive. I mean, he always treated me like a punk and shit, so he wasn't really one of my favorite people or whatever. So, like, when he passed away, it was kind of a relief because he was suffering so bad with this Alzheimer's. I mean, technically, he wasn't suffering. He was sitting there like it was any normal thing to just be like, not know who his son is, but yet talk about some story that happened back in 1934, you know, like at some, you know, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's the weirdest thing to see somebody go through dementia. I've seen two of my grandparents go through that, neither of which ever smoked marijuana. And you find out that marijuana, smoking just a joint a day, can prevent you from getting Alzheimer's disease. That's been more than proven by anecdotal studies or just people looking on. It's just a fact. You can demonstrate it. There's an actual reason why it happens. But his research on the possible chemical route by which pot could help guard against Alzheimer's. More research is needed. I thought this article actually had something in there about what it is. A lot of baby boomers who are already disposed to smoking pot will be making up their own minds about its benefit in warding off Alzheimer's. Now, I've told my parents this. Like, dude, all you got to do is smoke a joint a day. And it could prevent you from getting Alzheimer's. That's the worst thing you can lose is your brain. And if there's any chance that this thing could prevent you from doing that, I would highly encourage it. Highly encourage it. All right, I'm gonna skip reading this. I'll maybe go over these highlights. So if you're watching ABC News, you're gonna get this story about how marijuana is being used more and people are more open about their use. And as it turns out, more pregnant women are using marijuana than previously thought was, or there has been an increase. And according to ABC, or just the doctors that they talk to, the doctors are worried about it. There's nothing like that. They run the risk of losing their baby, Gitlow said. The problem with that statement, Stuart Gitlow, this guy is terrible too. I've read him before, and he is awful. This is just his propaganda piece, straight up. And all it is to try to scare a pregnant woman any way he can. And ending it with they run the risk of losing their baby. They don't. Not from marijuana. Now, if you're talking about because Child Protective Services might come along because some doctor narked on the woman, then yeah, then she might lose her baby literally that way. That's the only fucking way. And if you look at the comments section, it's kind of got a mixed bag here, but most people are in agreement in most of these comment sections that there's really nothing that has been proven or pointed out about the dangers of marijuana and being pregnant. And furthermore, there's no proof. There's no studies. None. This article here on Forbes magazine, so does using marijuana in pregnancy hurt a baby or not? It's really not a conclusive article. They don't really say yes or no by the time it's over. But what it does do is it shows you the studies that have been done about it. And the fact that there really isn't no good studies. There's the negative findings of no increased risk for preterm birth or low birth weight could just be because of inadequate study power. And it's true. All their studies always seem to couple marijuana and tobacco smoking in the same study subject. And there's even attempts to narrow these down and hone these studies. Like right here, Shana Connor, MD of Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, and her colleagues combed 6 databases of medical research up through August 2015, eventually ending up with 31 studies ranging from 1982 through 2015 that met their criteria. They only included observational, cohort, and case control studies in which they could separate the data on marijuana use from other substances, including tobacco. Among the 31 studies, 68% were conducted in the U.S. together. The studies included 7,851 women who used marijuana during pregnancy and 124,867 who did not. Use of marijuana was based on either self-reporting from the mothers from their objective testing of the umbilical cord, urine, saliva, or blood. The study did not distinguish between smoking marijuana and other forms of use such as ingestion. Almost no published studies examine ingested marijuana outcomes. Basically, there's really been no real actual studies that just wanted to focus on marijuana use only. So the low birth weight outcomes, less than 5.5 pound prematurely or born prematurely before 37 weeks of pregnancy, the researchers focus primarily on those because they're the outcomes most often studied and because they're the most likely outcomes at birth based on what we know about the body. However, the authors also attempted to calculate the risk of stillbirth, miscarriage, being admitted to a neonatal intensive care unit or level 2 nursery, low APGAR score, placental abruption, death during delivery, and infants being underweight for their gestational week of birth. Before making any adjustments for tobacco use or frequency of marijuana use, infants born to women who use marijuana were more likely to arrive earlier or have low birth weight. 15% of marijuana exposed newborns compared to 10% of newborns mothers who didn't use marijuana. So a 5% increase. But this increased risk dropped to statistical insignificance when the authors made either two adjustments, distinguishing between women who use marijuana less than 1 week or once a week versus those using it more often, or adjusting for tobacco use along with marijuana use. Can we just quit with the tobacco combination already? We already know tobacco causes all kinds of birth defects and low birth weight and premature births. We know all this shit. We fucking know it. It's a proven scientific fact. So if you're trying to do a study, then boot all those fucking tobacco users right the fuck out. Especially smokers of tobacco. In both cases, using marijuana less than weekly or without tobacco did not lead to a greater risk of preterm birth or low birth weight. Using marijuana at least once a week doubled the risk of preterm birth or low birth weight. I don't believe it, man. When the authors analyzed all the numbers together for the 7 studies that separately reported tobacco use and marijuana use, no increased risk of preterm birth or low birth weight showed up among those who used marijuana but didn't smoke cigarettes. There you have it. Similarly, after adjusting for tobacco use, the risk of placental abruption or underweight newborn were no greater for newborns whose mothers used marijuana than mothers who didn't. Again, although the risk of a lower average birth weight, stillbirth, or low APGAR score increased among infants exposed to marijuana, researchers did not have enough data to calculate these risks after adjusting for tobacco smoking. No, that you just said it, man. They didn't have any of those things happening with just marijuana use. But when you adjusted it and you said, okay, we can't find any of these, this didn't happen, we're only finding it with the cigarette combo, it's ridiculous, man. So again, the biggest limitation of the whole analysis is that the studies included did not contain enough data for enough infants to reliably calculate risks for many of the outcomes the authors wanted to look at. Can we just cut through all the bullshit and say that, guess what? None of these real serious problems were caused because of marijuana. Marijuana is a hallucinogenic drug that is inhaled, but that's whatever, man. We're talking about an infant that hasn't even been born yet. You guys are just, you're on this theory that because marijuana gets you high, the high that you don't like, the high that you don't understand, it's got to be dangerous. But it ain't. But you feel like it's something that's way too profound for an infant that hasn't even been out of the womb yet. You guys are just ridiculous, man. Here's a 4-page article from Psychiatric Times. And it basically, it is concerned with, all natural, organic, whole plant cannabis. This isn't like we're just using Sativex or something like that. But the article does have different studies in it from different ways that marijuana is used as medicine. and specifically for the treatment of different, psychological problems or disorders. And again, I'm not going to really read this whole thing, but I will say that it is pretty obvious to me that cannabis is one of, if not the best known medicines to mankind when talking about the treatment of anything that you would consider psychiatric situation. Any kind of mental disorder, whether it's temporary or permanent. It seems to me like even all the way to schizophrenia, whether or not the medical community is going to embrace marijuana as a good tool in the toolbox to use for these disorders and these ailments, people are going to use them anyway because it works. All right, even if it's to, and basically, okay, the overall theory is there's no cure for any of this shit, and what you're really aiming at is the symptoms. You're really aiming at the effects of having something like PTSD. And in the case of PTSD, we find out that cannabis had lowered the frequency of things that were causing the actual stress out. And again, I'll just pull one thing out because, right, here's the whole PTSD thing. And it includes kind of like scientifically exactly what's going on, And the fact is you have CB1 receptors all throughout the brain. The endocannabinoid system appears to be involved in the extinction of adverse memories, and both THC and CBD have been shown individually and in separate studies to facilitate extinction of conditioned fear responses. So there's a lot of applications for PTSD. What about opioids? We heard, sessions say, oh, you can't use marijuana to get people off of opioids. And we heard Chris Christie say this. We heard all the prohibitionists like to say it. Well, what about it? Well, in this study, recently published analysis of data on 44,000 illicit opiate users who completed a national survey on drug use and health from 2007 to 2013 found that marijuana use was associated with a 55% reduced risk of past year opioid abuse. So essentially saying that in the toolbox to fight opioid addiction, when you offer cannabis as a alternative medical therapy like they do with other things like methadone and all that shit, when cannabis was given as an option, you had a 55% success rate of someone that went a whole year without using opioids. So that's pretty good. But yeah, this is a good article. I highly recommend it. Psychiatrics Times, and the article itself is called Medical Marijuana and Mental Health, Cannabis Use in Psychiatric Practice. And if, like it's hardly approved either. Like a lot of the places that have medical marijuana, they still don't take seriously the applications that it has. And, I'll have to say that a lot of people fake their reason why they want to get a medical marijuana card because of these kind of problems rather than, oh yeah, I stubbed my toe. No, they didn't stub their toe. They just know that marijuana works for whatever problems they're having. And it ain't always on the list of qualifying conditions. Well, it's time again for good people that smoke weed. And when you're talking about medical marijuana, the government knows it is true that marijuana is medicine. And it knows that not only is marijuana medicine, but smoking joints is medicine. How does it know that? Well, it admittedly knows that because it gives 300 rolled joints to a couple different patients, I guess, but we're going to be focusing on Irvin Rosenfeld. So marijuana may be illegal in many parts of the United States, but it hasn't stopped a small group of citizens from receiving free marijuana for life from the U.S. government. How is this possible? In 1978, under President Jimmy Carter, the U.S. began a program called the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program. To be eligible for the program, one had to have a serious chronic health ailment. Those who qualified received marijuana from the U.S. government for life. The Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program came to an end in 1992 under President George H.W. Bush. But those who were enrolled before the program's termination were grandfathered in, and as a result, are still receiving free marijuana. It's 10 joints a day. At this time, only 4 Americans are still participating in the program. Barbara Douglas, this is an old article, about a year and a half old article. But anyhow, Barbara Douglas receives 9 free ounces of marijuana per month to treat her MS. She has been enrolled since 1991. George McMahon receives 8 free ounces of marijuana every month to treat his Nail-Patalia syndrome and has been enrolled since 1990. To treat glaucoma, Elvie Musica has been receiving 8 free ounces a month since 1988. Irvin Rosenfeld receives 9 free ounces of marijuana per month to treat a rare bone disorder. He has been receiving marijuana since 1982. In 2009, Irving Rosenfeld, a former stockbroker, was featured on ABC for smoking over 115,000 joints provided by the federal government. Rosenfeld receives 300 marijuana joints every 25 days. He said, "I don't know that I've broken a record, but I've certainly set one. No one else in the world can document having smoked 115,000 cannabis cigarettes, let alone the ones I smoked before that. I'm living proof that medical cannabis is real medicine. We need to get medicine in the hands of patients who really need it." Not only did he prove that marijuana is medicine because he's got this rare bone disorder and he's still around or whatever, he's still doing fine, but doesn't that have something to say? He's smoking 10 joints a day for what? How many years? 35 years? 25, 35? Since 1982. All right, he's been smoking 10 joints a day. Long-term marijuana what effects, huh? A Fox affiliate in Florida caught up with Rosenfeld in November of 2015. He was still smoking free marijuana, government marijuana. Years after he joined the program, he remains adamant legalizing medical marijuana. Quote, "The United States federal government has been supplying me 10 marijuana cigarettes per day for almost 33 years. In that same vein, arresting people for possessing marijuana they give me for medical use." Marijuana question, the marijuana in question is grown at, of course, the only place the government grows, Old Miss. Anyway, another thing we have, here's his picture of his joints. Nice, huh? So 300 joints a month for this guy. The FDA will not say how many people who joined this program are still living. We found records leading to 4, and this article was pretty old too. It's from 2015, November. The marijuana is grown in Mississippi. Rosenfeld uses it to treat a rare bone tumor disorder. They both receive a tin of marijuana each month and are instructed to use 10 marijuana cigarettes a day. A lot of times, he says, many federal lawmakers are unaware of the compassionate, this thing that allowed him to have this. They're always surprised. They don't know the government ever supplied anybody. And that's all I got this week. But, Yeah, here he is back in 2013 talking about his marijuana, his free joints.
I am not breaking any law. I'm a federal patient. I'm using marijuana. I'm legal.
Yes, Irv Rosenfeld is given 300 joints every 25 days by the same federal government that classifies marijuana as a Class 1 drug. The pot is used to treat a rare bone disease which causes painful tumors, and he's been getting it now for more than 30 years. It's a bizarre mix of medicine, politics, and law, and Irv joins us now from his home in South Florida. Good to see you. So I think people want to know why in the world you're getting these drugs. So what is the story behind the federal government actually providing you marijuana?
In 1971, I discovered that medical cannabis or medical marijuana was better than the narcotics and drugs they were giving me. And I was a patient, not a criminal, and I knew if I continued to use it illegally, I'd be arrested. So I decided to take on the federal government. I started in 1972, and they started a program in 1978 called a Compassionate Care Investigational New Drug, which I finally was able to win under the Food and Drug Administration and became the second person in the United States in November of 1982 to receive, again, 300 medical cannabis cigarettes every 25 days.
And there aren't many of you getting this.
No, misfortune is there's only 4 of us left in the country.
4?
Yeah, George Bush Sr. shut the program down that we're under in 1992.
And who's providing it?
It's Uncle Sam and the taxpayers' money, including my own taxpayers' money. The marijuana grows, the cannabis grows on the campus of the University of Mississippi. The government farm's been there since 1968. They then take the entire plant and they ship it by truck to Raleigh, North Carolina, to Raleigh Research Triangle. There it's freeze-dried, put into cigarette form by a regular cigarette rolling machine, and they take it and they freeze 300 cigarettes to a tin can, and that's how us patients get it. It's then shipped to our pharmacies, and it's shipped by Federal Express.
Part of what's interesting about your story is there aren't many people who have been using.
Let me just say I'm very dubious about this marijuana rolled, these cigarettes. I don't know, it can't be total garbage or this guy would be dead by now.
Using marijuana for medical purposes for decades, and people wonder about the effects.
But I have seen the weed from Old Miss, and it looks like total garbage. But he's about to tell you about the long-term effects.
What has been your experience in using it for so long?
The effects of using medical cannabis for all these years has been this, that I've stopped taking all my opiates or narcotics since 1990. I take no muscle relaxants. I take no sleeping pills. So cannabis is able to supplant all those different medicines that I used to take. That's why the pharmaceutical companies aren't very happy with me. My lung capacity is 108% of normal. So again, I've never smoked cigarettes, but again, as far as cannabis, it's not deterred my lung capacity at all. And I'm a very healthy disabled person. I'm able to work every day as a financial advisor, which is a very stressful job to begin with. On weekends, I help teach, I volunteer and teach at an organization called Shake a Leg in Miami. We teach mentally and physically challenged and economically challenged children and adults how to sail adaptive sailboats. And even though I'm gonna be 60 years old at the end of this month, I still play softball on Sundays. And I'm able to do all this because I have the right medicine. And without it, if I were still alive, most likely I'd be on disability. I'd be a drain on society, not a productive member of society. And I wonder, sitting at home, how many people today, if they were able to get the right medicine, could get back to work and be productive?
That is the question. And that's the problem this country has with the opioids. Really a lot of the problem is overprescribing of the opioids. There's so many prescriptions people are getting. They're just prescribing opioids literally for people that stub their toe. And you hear people, the prohibitionists talking about marijuana. Oh, they get a medical card just for stubbing their toe, just so they can get high. Well, that's what people are literally doing, and doctors are doing with the opioids. And we have a serious problem with the opioids. And this guy just told you. He hasn't done opioids since 1990. He would be a drain on society instead of a productive member of society, like he just said. On opioids, he was wasting away, and with marijuana, he can do regular, everyday shit. He's 60 years old and still plays softball, man. How many of you 60-year-old out there guys are playing softball? All right, I'm not saying smoking marijuana every day is like the fountain of youth or whatever, but I'm 45 years old, and I Marijuana is awesome, dude. It's the best medicine ever. I stopped doing opioids. I don't even remember when. It was so many years ago, decades.
You've mentioned that Big Pharma doesn't want people to know about the benefits of marijuana. So I guess I'm interested in what you're getting at there. You think there's some effort to hide the actual usefulness of this?
Most definitely. But what is the expert who gets medical marijuana from Uncle Sam, the guy that says it's not medicine? What's he say?
There definitely is. I mean, first of all, I'm a perfect example of that. I've been getting it for 30 years. That means my doctors put reports in every 6 months. Do you think the federal government has ever used those reports to see how positive I am and see how well I'm doing? No, because the pharmaceutical lobby is one of the biggest in the country, and they don't want to see people not taking their drugs. Okay, it's like me. I mean, I used to take Dilaudid, I used to take Valium, I used to take Quaalude, I used to take Butazolid and Alka, Lioresal, Paraffin Forte. I mean, that's a lot of pills and a lot of money.
Last thing on your fascinating personal story, as you said, there's just a handful of you in the whole country. What happens when you go to the airport? There has to have been an awkward moment or two.
Yeah, over the 30 years, I've had quite a few awkward moments where I've actually been detained. And now in Fort Lauderdale, I call a lieutenant and let him know what flight I'm taking, what time I'm supposed to leave, and what time I'll be going through security. So they send a letter then to the police department at Fort Lauderdale International. So therefore, if TSA does stop me with my tin can, they're notified about that.
Irv, thanks a lot.
Well, Brooke, one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
My book.
Yeah.
Okay, if anybody wants to know the history of the medical marijuana movement in this country, they need to get a copy of my book. It's my life story about all the different situations where I've been busted by Mickey Mouse, I've been popped by DEA, all the different stories that I've had. And this will give you also the history of the medical marijuana movement. And it's called My Medicine. It's available at mymedicinethebook.com. That's www.mymedicinethebook.com.
What's that guy look 60 years old to you?
Even if you weren't selling a product as consumer-friendly as marijuana, you seem to be a pitchman for anything. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care, Brooke.
That'll do it for us for tonight.
That'll do it for me as well. But yeah, Irv Rosenthal. 30 years, man. He smoked over 100,000 joints we know about. All right, I'll see y'all soon.